Here, and I hope, anytime that you have any questions or anything, just feel free to, just go ahead and shout out or raise your hand or something. It's going to be informal, so I'm just going to start with an overview of, what are some of the implications of the Autopilot. So this is the panel right here, and just a big overview. So I'm going to go from the overview to the detail part. And there's safety. It does bring about safety, but there's a downside to it. The thing is, if you don't know how to use it, it takes you somewhere where you're not. If you don't know what it's doing, or if you don't understand it, it can take you, run you right into a mountain or something. So there is a downside of it. And we saw recently one of the things that was interesting after I had this seminar scheduled was, what happened to the 737 MAX. So we had this runaway, we had a trim runaway when we were still being investigated, but that can happen in the smaller planes too. You can get trim runaway, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Some of the other implications of this is now we finally have a technically advanced aircraft. So this airplane now, so you now can get a commercial rating in this airplane. I'll give you some of the more details about that later, but the other thing to think about is, just how busy it's getting now. This is a flight that I did yesterday, so you can imagine flying single pilot, low IFR. This is everything that's going on. I did this yesterday morning. And so I'm flying along here, and I couldn't program all this on the ground because they totally changed my routing right before I got to JFK. They said, ready to copy full routing. So everything from JFK on, while I was flying, I had to program all this into the box, and they're talking to you, you're getting all these, they're talking like a mile a minute, all this kind of stuff. And so that's another reason to think about as you get more advanced in your flying and everything. You might want to fly out here to the islands where I went out to Nantucket yesterday, but you might want to go to Martha's Vineyard or Block Island or go to Long Island and stuff like that. You're going to have to deal with that even as a VFR pilot. You have to. They're going to want you to, if you're going to fly through Class Bravo airspace, they're going to want you to hold altitude. They're going to want you to hold headings. So again, the way I'm going to try to format this morning is talk mostly about the VFR stuff for the first, and then get into the IFR stuff later. We're going to talk a little bit about technically advanced aircraft. So let's talk a little bit more about what that is, how's that defined. So it's if you go into if someone wants to get a commercial rating, it's in 61-129. And so you have to have 10 hours in a complex airplane. A complex airplane, a turbine-powered airplane, or technically advanced airplane. So what is a technically advanced airplane? So a technically advanced airplane is, so you have to have a PFD, so what's our top G5 is, and it has to include all that stuff, and our G5 includes all that stuff. And the MFD, so this is where the question came about. Does our Garmin 430 count as a MFD? So let's look at this. It says it has to have a moving map using a GPS, so of course it does that. And the aircraft position has to be displayed, and it does that too. And then the other requirement is that it has to have a 2-axis autopilot, and we now have a 2-axis autopilot. And display elements, yes, it must be continuously visible. In other words, I can't even think of an example why. I guess if you turn it off, or if it's not, for some reason it's not capable of being displayed during the whole flight. I don't know exactly what that means, but anyway, so there you have it.
I think it's because some of the Avidine displays, you can display both. But if they have one display, you could do PFD or MFD.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start talking about the components of it, because as you know, and again, getting back to the 737 crash, that MAX crash that happens, the two of them that happened, is very important to understand the systems. And you can't understand the systems unless you understand every component that goes into this autopilot. Because there's things that are feeding into it, And you got to know every little piece of it. It's important to understand every piece of equipment. So we're going to take a couple minutes talking about that. So the first thing that we have is, of course, we have these two G5s. Both are talking to the Autopilot. So again, we have the primary flight display on the top, and which is the one G5, and then we have the HSI on the bottom. Now remember, one thing to remember about these boxes are exactly the same. It's almost like, just think of your TV. You have a television in your house. You can hook it up to the cable, or you can hook it up to your DVD player, or your VCR if you still use that. So these displays, it's just a screen. It's just being fed information. So in fact, you can, like say for instance, you're flying in instrument conditions or something like this, and this display totally conked out. Well, what you can do is you can just, it has a reversionary mode. You can press this button here and move this display down to here, and then just use this as your attitude indicator. Any questions on the G5? Okay, so then here's some of the other components. So again, we have two G5s. We have the mode controller, so that's how you actually use the different modes of the Autopilot and turn it on and off. That's the main hub of this whole system. Everything's being fed into that. The servos, so actually the controller moves your two servos. So we have two servos in this airplane. So we have one for the roll and we have one for pitch. We don't have one for the rudder. We don't have one for yaw. That would be a yaw damper. So that is an option on this airplane. You can even see a yaw damper, but we might as well just pretend that button doesn't exist, but a piece of tape over it or something. Because this yaw damper button here doesn't work for us since we don't have that other servo, the third servo. And there is also this button, this box here is, there has to be a box, this interface adapter here. That takes the signal from the Garmin, our existing Garmin 430, processes it in, processes the signal, the GPS signal, however it needs to be processed for the controller to operate. Oh yeah, another thing I forgot to talk about is we do have a magnetometer. So you never have to, on the bottom HSI, you never have to set it. Remember before, when you have a standard steam gauge one, you always got to set it to the compass. We don't have to do that because it has a box in there that automatically takes care of that. And we do also have one pitch trim servo. All right, and just so you see where all this stuff is, there's also a go-around button here. So this button here is used for two things. Probably not so much for VFR usage, although you could use it. Like say for instance you were taking off at night, this would be a good, I'll have a slide of this later on, but this could be used, say for instance you're just taking off at night into like a black, and everything's black at the ground, you want to be able to see your pitch. What that does is it sets the flight director up to 7 degrees so that you would just put your miniature airplane that's on there, you would just move it up to that to make sure you're getting the proper pitch, make sure you're climbing out. If it's a dark night and you're just having a little bit of, even though it's VFR, sometimes you can lose, situational awareness. So it could be used for that too. So that's a button for taking off and for going around too. And we also have, so you have a disconnect button, that's a red button right here. We also have a trim switch here. And this is very important for what I was talking about, with things that can go wrong. So what happens if that trim switch would run away, get stuck for some reason, stuff like that? You wouldn't want the airplane just to keep pitching up. You don't want to be fighting against it. So if you ever got in a situation where that thing just kept on running for some reason, here's the circuit breaker for that trim switch. If that ever. Here's you have one for the Autopilot, so we do have a trim switch, and we also have the Autopilot disconnect button. If the Autopilot would be doing something for some reason, it wouldn't shut off, and it was doing something that you didn't understand or you didn't want it to do, you could just pull that circuit breaker. So it's very important to know where they are.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why is there two trim buttons? Do they both work, or?
One is a ground. At least in the 141, we had
two, yeah.
two switches. If you just hit one or the other, nothing happened. You have to hit them both.
You can't hit it by mistake.
Okay.
I think that might be it, yeah.
No, I wasn't
I
sure.
wasn't
I
sure
haven't
the
used
answer to
it.
that, so I'm glad someone knows that, but I didn't know that you have to hit both of them. Yeah. Any questions on that?
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, he's already said all this. Oh, and just to reiterate something I think I've mentioned before was that the top, make sure you understand that the top Garmin 430 runs this HSI right here.
Well,
Yeah.
they changed that. They moved it
No, it's
down.
still that way.
No, it's still up.
It's still up there?
Yeah.
It's still, yeah.
Yep.
They're supposed to reverse
Yeah,
it.
last I flew it
Really?
like this.
Flew it yesterday and it's still there.
Yeah, it's still that way.
You mean there?
Do they have an order to change
You
it?
mean there's talking about putting this right here?
Well,
Yeah,
have they been told to do that though?
yeah.
Smart.
I talked to Bob about it. I'm like, it should be right next to the radio. And then leave the
Well, that
back on
wasn't
the
done.
top.
Something else wasn't done. They didn't sync the mag compass to the G5. It's still off by 9 degrees, but that's another issue.
Okay. Yeah, okay, well, I'm glad that
I think
you're
that was
bringing this
done
stuff up.
I did. Yeah,
So,
That may have been corrected as of yesterday, they had it up this morning.
yeah. Well, we brought it back in. and
Oh, it
wasn't
still
correct.
wasn't corrected?
Yeah.
Okay,
anyway, again, remember that this
needs to be readdressed.
Garmin 430 here drives this HSI right here. And you can still use this here as a backup if you want, or say for instance you're using VORs, you want to do a cross radio on a VOR. That hasn't changed. You can still set that up as it, or you could do localizer approach or something like that with this number 2 or a VOR. That's all the same. And again, the G5 is wired to the, just to finish talking about the systems, is the G5 here is wired to the master, not the avionics switch. Because again, it's important to understand how things are wired. So if some electrical issue happened with this, the only way to turn it off would be to turn the master off. You know, if for some reason there would be a short in there and this was causing the fire, then obviously turning the avionics master off wouldn't solve the problem. You have to turn the master off. And just some other little housekeeping items here. So again, to change the backlight on it, so if you get in the airplane you can't see it or something, so you can just press this button in here, you press it, don't hold it, and then this backlighting thing pops up. You can either have it on auto, so it has a sensor on it, and you can turn the knob and then it makes it brighter or less. Is there any questions on that? Oops.
The other pieces.
What, something fell off?
Yeah, backward.
This is the cover. The battery. All right, so I want a quick talk since I'm not really going to make this a whole course in how to read a PDF and stuff like that, or how to PFD, but I do want to do a general overview just to make sure you understand what some of these things are. So again, you have your airspeed. Again, this is just like a 6-pack. You have, the airspeeds on the left. The, attitude indicator is in the middle here, and your altitude here is on the right. And your vertical speed is this little magenta thing right over here. So if you right now, that shows going down at 500 feet a minute. And then this is what your altitude's bugged. And then, so again, it shows bugged 2,500. He's at 2,620 right now. This is the airspeed. Again, this is sort of, you can look at this in the manual. Again, this is the same as your steam gauge one. This is 10, 20, 30, 45, 60. This is how much battery is in there. Oh, and then this does have an implementometer. So you have your ball in there, and then you do have rate of turn. This is something that a lot of people don't. This is course deviation. So say for instance, you actually can do navigation and add it and maneuver the airplane, with pitch and roll and everything with the attitude indicator. But it also has the features of the HSI right here, because if you ever lost your PFD and you needed to do the reversionary mode that I was talking about, where you just press the button and it switches down, then you still can see, still has your course deviation indicator here, and it has the glide slope here. Okay, and it actually shows what your heading button is there too.
Brian, quick
Yes,
question.
go ahead. Yeah.
How sensitive is that the ball there, in relation to the old?
Pretty much the same, because I've been, because we have, in this, I'm trying to think, I would say sometimes there's a little bit of a lag, or something.
Yeah, because normally, the last couple flights, I've been centering that, but the one, the old gauge isn't centered. It's either usually off to the right a little bit, so.
So you're just asking, what?
It seems more sensitive, basically, because it looks like it's displaced to the right, but the G5 is showing center, and the G5 doesn't seem to move very much, so I'm wondering, I don't know which one's more reliable.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Okay.
Can't really answer that. Okay, so now we're going to get into that one. So just talk about that. Okay, so let's get into let's get into it now. What's really important to remember is that and probably what I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about is this is the scoreboard here. This is really what you want to pay attention to, and what I've seen now that I've flown with some people and see where the pitfalls are. I think I can help advise for some situations where some of the times what I see happening is someone push a button here, they think it didn't, sometimes there's a little bit of delay for this light to come on. So then they push it again and it actually is taking it. So what you want to do whenever you push a button, you want to make sure you look up at the scoreboard here to make sure that if you press the heading button, that heading light comes on. But before I get to that, let's talk about the different sections of how this is broken out. So everything that's in red right here, that has everything to do with maneuvering the airplane in roll. So it's called lateral mode. So that's how you're going to move the airplane laterally through the sky. So that's this way. How are you moving it this way? So we have this button here. This is the heading. This is the heading button. The heading bug. So if you push that button, what it does is it syncs it up. So if you're flying along, you push that button, and your heading bug is, say for instance you're flying north and your heading bug is at 272, you press that sync button, it just snaps up to whatever heading you're taking. And then you turn it, so it has two modes, pushing it to sync it, and then you turn it to change your heading bug. All right. What? Anyone have a comment? Okay.
I just said,
Yeah. You press the heading button, so after the autopilot's activated, if you press the heading button, you always want to sync your heading bug before you press this heading button, because what happens if your heading bug is way off, what happens if it's off to the right, and they're telling you to turn left to a certain heading, the airplane's going to go like this, then you're going to say, oh, it should be, you're flying north and your heading bug's at 030, and you just press the heading button, it's going to start turning the wrong way. So you always want to sync your heading bug before you activate a heading mode.
Brian?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. as an example, we were flying from N71 yesterday, coming in on ILS, going to outlet. And we were given a vector, we were flying on autopilot, and they said, okay, turn right heading 150. So now in that instance, you actually have to turn it manually to get it there, would you not?
We're saying turn right.
Yeah, yeah. If
Or
you're,
you can
if you're
have it-
tracking, let's say if you're tracking in the nav mode,
Yeah.
and they said, okay, now they're giving you a vector, turn right.
Yeah, well, if you're in nav mode, what you do is you would turn, and we're going to run through a bunch of examples, but I'm happy to
Okay.
answer this as it comes up. So if you're in nav mode, and you're, say for instance they're saying turn right heading 150, if you're heading 090 right now, then you're in nav mode, so what you want to make sure you do is sync the heading bug first. You sync the heading bug, then what you would do is turn the heading bug to 150, then you would hit that heading button. So the sequence would be sync the heading bug, turn to 150, hit the heading button.
I guess I don't understand why the first step. Why do you have to sync it first? Why don't you just turn it to 150 and then hit heading?
Because what happens, well, just
Well,
makes
you
it
could,
easier
it's-
sometimes.
Yeah, it's just.
You could, but the reason is what happens if it's over at,
Oh,
what if your heading bug just happens to be at like 330? Now you got to turn. They're just telling you to turn 30
I
degrees.
gotcha. I gotcha.
It's just a good practice to get into.
Mhm.
That would be my suggestion. Of course, we're going to get into technique, and then everyone has a different technique, and whose way is better than another way. But I would just say, just for simplicity purposes. Okay. So then, here's another button we're probably not going to use. This isn't even in the Cirrus. This tracking button here. And the only thing that I can see that it was before is, like, say for instance you're doing one of these things where you're trying to map out, or you're doing a surveillance, like you're trying to find a lost person or something, and you're doing these things where you have to track, you have to actually track like north. Your airplane has to go across the ground at a certain track. Like you have to track so it's different than following a navigation course, because then the airplane automatically, so if you're in nav mode, the airplane automatically takes into account the wind. So I really don't see any need for that. So there's another button you don't have to worry about, I would say. All right. So the buttons we do want to have, so for VFR pilots, again, the only buttons you're going to use here is the heading button, the heading knob, which has two functions, what they talk about, the heading button and the nav button. So we talked about the heading button. The nav button is for just following a course. So if you're going direct to some place, whatever's in the GPS, you hit the nav button, it's just going to follow that course. Okay?
So the nav button inside the red circle, the red.
Yes. Again, that's in lateral mode. It has nothing to do. We're going to talk about this over here.
Okay, but on the top where the sections on the top GPS.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was going to talk
So
about that.
nav and
What it's going to
GPS.
do is it's going to show up. It's very important. I'm just about ready to make that comment. The way this is broken out: lateral, airplane or autopilot controller, and then this is pitch mode. All this has to do with pitch. We're going to talk about the G5 display. This is lateral mode. This tells you whether or not the autopilot's on. If we had yaw damper, it would say YD right here. So the only thing you're going to see in this middle section here is the green AP. Either going to see green AP or black. That's all you're going to see in this middle section. And in this section right here, we're going to spend time in it because this is the most complicated. Is what, again, green is what's active, almost like your flip-flops in your radio. You have an active and standby. So in this case right here, this guy here would probably be, in this case here, I'm guessing he's being vectored for an RNAV approach right now. Because what's happening is he's given a heading, and then the course is in standby, so he's waiting for the course to come in. And then obviously he's waiting for, and then once the course is captured, this heading's going to go out, this is going to turn green and snap over here. And then what's going to happen is after the glide path is intercepted, this is going to flash, all this is going to go away, and it's going to say green GPM. We're going to get to a bunch of examples about that. But I just want to go over the buttons right now, and the point in this whole slide is to show that this left section, the middle section, and the right section are exactly laid out the same as they are on the autopilot controller.
But if you hit nav, if you want to confirm that that's active,
What it's going to do is say
it's gonna
nav.
say-
It's just going to say, what it's going to do is it's going to say GPS if it's following GPS. And if it's following it depends on what course you have in the Garmin 430. Because in the Garmin 430 you can toggle between GPS and VLOC.
Oh, okay, right.
Remember the VLOC, and then what happens is, and we'll get into this more later, what happens is it actually gives you green needles in the bottom. So say for instance, common mistake is people are doing approach or something like that and they forget to press the, or if you're flying, even if for VFR, this is the VFR portion. So say for instance, you're going to fly to a VOR, you forget to, and you tune the VOR in and everything, you tune the frequency in, then you forget to hit the VLOC button, it's just, the airplane's going to keep flying whatever GPS course you have in there. So if you want to fly along the VOR, you have to hit the VOR button, VLOC button has to be pressed, and then the bottom G5, which is the HSI, is going to turn green. So that confirms that it's actually taking a signal from the VOR versus the GPS. And it tells you up here too. Because instead of saying GPS, it'll say VOR, it'll say LOC if you're following a localizer.
Going back to the heading, have you already activated the autopilot button, or does that?
Okay, so then, yeah, so that's the thing. You actually can hit the heading. It's a good question. It brings up a very good point. Is this isn't a good slide to show this, but so you see this yellow part right here. That's you. That's the airplanes. That's whatever the airplane's doing. This purple part right here is the flight director. So if the flight director looks hollow, that means that the autopilot's not on. You can just follow the flight director. So another very important point is that the autopilot always follows what the flight director is doing. So actually, when you program this, and that's another systems thing to keep, on the top of your head to understand is that the autopilot's not going to follow. What is the autopilot doing? All it's doing is following what the flight director's doing. So if you have the flight director on, if you're flying the airplane, you're just following the flight director through space. Like if they tell you to climb, so if you're climbing up, so here you are taking off and they're telling you to climb to 3,000, turn left heading 270 if you take off of here. So you actually can program, so the sequence would be to turn the heading bug to 270, and I'll get to this in a minute, to turn to 3,000 feet, so the flight director is going to pitch up and go to the left. And what you would do is you would just follow that if you wanted to follow it. If you don't want to do that anymore, then you just press. That's after this button here is lit. And obviously you're going to see that there is no indication here to tell you your flight director's on because it just you just get purple command bars come up. Then you know your flight director's on. If you get the AP sign, that means you're flying it. And that's another good point that I wanted to make is that you always make sure you don't, just like if you have two competent pilots in the airplane, you want to always